Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great webinar on tap, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for any of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate. Just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions, and we'll try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. Also happening at the end of today's webinar, we will be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you will be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is Automating App Security with AI, How to Secure a Million Lines of Code in 5 Minutes. Our speakers today are Will Hickey, who is Data Science Architect at Irdeto, Andrew Hoyt, who is pre-sales engineer at Connected Health, and off camera is Catherine Chambers, who is senior product manager at Irdeto. Catherine is having a little bit of technical difficulty with her webcam. We wish we could see her on camera, but I know she'll do a fabulous job even not on camera. So Catherine, welcome to the webinar to all of 3 of you. And then Catherine, I know that you are going to be the first speaker, so I'm going to hand it over to you and let you get right to it.
Thanks. Well, it's nice to see you both. I'm sorry you can't see me. That didn't work out quite the way we intended this afternoon. How are you doing, Andrew?
Technology, I understand. Yeah, pretty good. It's probably best to keep your location a secret anyway. The hacker community is always after you. We understand you gotta be protected in this day and age. We don't want any hackers tracking down your location from something in your background or something like that, right, Catherine? Yeah. So really, I mean, honestly, thanks so much, both of you, for agreeing to join the webinar with me. Just for the audience, a little bit of background about me. I used to work out of the Ottawa office of Irdeto with these 2 guys, with Will and Catherine. I was a software engineer there for about 3 years before they moved me over here to Amsterdam, which is what you're seeing in the background now. Maybe a little bit of glare in the background, but this is where our head office is here in Amsterdam. And I haven't really gotten much of a chance to catch up with these 2 old friends of mine, right? So I thought it could be a nice, comfortable way to have a nice informal chat via this webinar, because to be honest, the Ottawa office has been doing a lot of really cool new tech, and I haven't really gotten to be exposed to it as much as I used to be, right? I mean, working out of the office, I used to have a hand in designing some of these products, and I haven't really gotten any exposure at all to what's new and exciting coming out of the office. So what we've really been hearing a lot about these days within the company, and it is this trusted software product, right? So this idea of being able to automate the protection of mobile applications. And so I really wanted to get a chance to pick the brains of Will and Catherine to see sort of what the capabilities of this new technology actually are. So with that in mind, Catherine, just off the top here, I'm really curious. I mean, securing a million lines of code in 5 minutes, that's a bold claim. I mean, I'm a security engineer. I do this stuff manually all the time, and it takes a lot longer than 5 minutes to secure far less than a million lines of code. Are you serious here? How is this even happening?
Well, I have to admit, I haven't actually benchmarked the protection of a million line mobile app. That would be a pretty big mobile app, I believe, and would probably take a bit more than 5 minutes. Frankly, the tagline was meant to be catchy and to highlight really what our guiding principle here has been, with trusted software in solving security problems. It's that if you can find a way to automatically apply meaningful security at scale, then security just becomes a compute problem, and it doesn't require a lot of time.
Right. Yeah, and it does make a lot of sense. I mean, we were sort of making strides in that direction already by the time I left the Ottawa office. We were doing a lot more automation, trying to get the tool to do a lot more work itself without having as much user input. So this seems like the next natural progression for sure. And it sounds like it's going really well, which is fantastic. To me, one of the interesting aspects of this is focusing on the mobile market specifically. I mean, certainly when I was out of the Ottawa office, we were in talks with a lot of big enterprise solutions, a lot of big software shops, some of the biggest in the world. I wasn't getting a lot of calls from, you know, the guy designing Flappy Bird to try and make sure that his intellectual property wasn't going to be stolen. Are applications really coming online with the idea of securing their code the way we did for enterprise software?
Yeah, you bet. Actually, I think I have control of the screen now, so I can, I think, go through a couple of, oh, there, you can see me. There's me. One little picture of Catherine before we continue. You know, I have a little funny graphic here that I can show instead of showing my funny face. You know, we've been really seeing an exploding usage of mobile apps in the last few months, and I think this is not surprising, especially around apps, you know, dealing with connectivity or you know, our ability to work remotely. And you know, what we're seeing is, from these stats that we pulled out of Apptopia, who's a data vendor we work with, you know, it's really exploding. The importance of apps are really exploding, and they are, in fact, the new endpoint. You know, we tend to think of devices as being the endpoint, but the mobile app is the way we connect to everything. It's the way we connect to, you know, our enterprises, our workplaces. We connect to important back-end systems through things like payments, or you know, even we use it to control, you know, things that have physical security requirements, like our vehicles or our homes, you know, the door locks in our homes. So yeah, it's becoming a real top of mind concern for people.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, everything I do is on apps these days. I'm not using a lot of desktop enterprise software anymore. So it certainly makes sense. I would want my banking app to be as protected as, you know, Microsoft Windows is at this point, to be honest with you. So it makes a ton of sense. And sort of along that line, I'd love to know, maybe from Will, if I could throw it over to you. Will, what exactly are the protections that you're adding into these mobile applications? Is it all the stuff that we did back in the day, or is it you got some new technologies? What's being added? What's being brought to bear on these mobile applications?
Well, you know, I think a better question is what would you do for these mobile applications, right? I mean, when I first started on this problem years ago, that was the first question I had, and then you ran away. So,
yeah,
you know, you tell me.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Well, I mean, I do remember just before leaving, you joining the company and you having a lot of questions for me and my colleagues in the Ottawa office about how and where and what type of protections to apply to software. And I found it really really engaging, right? I mean, this was a chance for us to express sort of the expertise we've been building into our tools for years. And yeah, I mean, just, you know, for those in the audience, maybe who don't know a lot about the types of protections that we apply, basically what you're generally trying to do to avoid reverse engineers is a couple of things, right? You're trying to generally do about 3 things really effectively when you're protecting your software. The first is that you want to make it very hard for them to attach or make use of the tools they're used to, right? A lot of these reverse engineers have very sophisticated tools, very sophisticated disassemblers that can show the logic of your program in plain text, in a flow chart, in whatever medium they want, essentially. So what you really want to do is make them have as hard a time as possible. So that means making sure you're incorporating anti-debugger technology. You want to make sure your apps aren't running on jailbroken or rooted devices. Those are the types, you know, you want to make sure nobody can add hooking frameworks to their devices, that kind of thing. Those are the types of standard security technologies that you always want to make sure are embedded into your applications, whether they're mobile applications or desktop enterprise applications. But the problem is that oftentimes we tend to bolt that security on at the last minute, right? That's kind of something you do with an SDK. Maybe it's an open source SDK, or maybe you even paid money for it, you bought it from some company. But at the end of the day, it boils down to an API call to some sort of SDK, right? And it turns out that those are the easiest types of things to jump over or sniff out. And that's the first thing reverse engineers typically do. What you generally want to then combine it with is some way of preventing static and dynamic analysis, right? Because that's what a reverse engineer is going to attempt in order to jump over the walls that allow or that prevent them from modifying your application. So when we talk about static analysis defeating techniques, what we'll often about are things like control flow flat. So the idea there is to remove the logic of your program, to obfuscate or hide the logic of your program, which will typically appear to a reverse engineer as a nice hierarchical flowchart in their disassembler tools. And generally, when they see that flowchart, they'll know exactly what path through the code they want it to take. And that's how they'll start jumping or snipping out key parts of your security paradigm. Now, control flow flattening, that's something we've done for years, something our tools have done for years. It's something we then use when we go to these enterprise software companies to protect their desktop applications. But it's generally not enough. Usually there's still a way for a reverse engineer to then step through your code line by line as it executes and perform what we call a dynamic analysis, right? It allows them to recreate the control flow even if you've obfuscated it. So you want to make sure you're also embedding dynamic analysis prevention techniques. For us at Irdeto, one of our big ones is our data transforms. Our data transforms are state of the art. They're some of the best in class. And that's largely because not only are we masking the magical constants in your program, right? The constants that turn your program from running in its standard production mode into a demo mode, the constants that indicate somebody is an administrator versus a guest or something like that. Those are the constants that reverse engineers are constantly on the lookout for, and they're trying to modify. So you want to apply these data transformations. It's going to mask those values, and it's going to mask the operations performed on those values so that you don't have to put the original values back at any point. And that makes sure that even if they're stepping through the code line by line, they're not going to be able to find those magical constants. So, I mean, these are just a couple of the techniques that we'll often add in to the customers that we talk to. But we've never really thought of applying it to mobile applications. And typically, even when we apply it to enterprise software, it's generally a manual process, right? We have tools that can assist it, but it's still a guy like me, a guy like some of my colleagues will be going in and guiding those tools to the places in your code that are security sensitive and that maybe don't have as much of a performance impact. So Will, I mean, I'm going to throw it back to you again. Are these the types of technologies you're talking about? This is what you're actually applying to these mobile apps? How do you make sure that they're being applied in the right spot? How do you make sure that they're not blowing out the user experience of these applications? I mean, that's no easy job. I get paid a lot of money to do it.
Well, no, that's kind of the issue. So one of the things I learned is that, just to understand the things that you're describing takes forever. I mean, it took me months before you threw out a lot of buzzwords out there. No, and if anyone wants to hurt their brain, look up like homomorphic operators, homomorphic encryption. Like, if you really want to give your brain a strain, go for that. These are pretty complicated things, and it takes a long time to learn how to master them. And what I found is that Irdeto has this toolkit that does all of these things, and they're all extremely powerful, but they're also all extremely complicated. And they take a guy like you, Andrew, or one of these other security engineers to really apply them properly. And that's what keeps it out of the hands of most people. Certainly kept it out of my hands, and that's why I had to bug you so often. So what I learned was, instead of telling people what to do, I was going to ask every security engineer at Irdeto hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of questions about different code samples, and figure out, what would you do if you had this toolkit? What would you do to this block of code? And with Catherine's help, over enough time, we were able to collect enough data that we could then present this as a natural language processing problem. So now we build a model where code goes in and out comes, here's some security treatment you should apply to this code. Now, the other problem, of course, is performance, because I could tell you right now the best way to secure an application is just to do all of it, everything, right? Let's throw the kitchen sink at it, and then we're going to encase it in concrete, and then we're going to launch it into deep space, and no one will ever touch it. The problem, of course, is that that's not exactly accessible or usable. So the other issue here is is managing that trade-off. And that's where a lot of people, even in enterprise, that's where they spend a lot of their time, is managing that trade-off between security and performance. So now that just becomes, for me, a data science problem, and one that isn't going to replace you. It's not. Like, you're an expert. I'm not even pretending to your level. However, we are now at a point where we can offer something, and that something is significantly better than what people are doing now.
Yeah, I mean, again, it makes a lot of sense. It's about sort of raising the bar for entry level security protection in the mobile app world, right? And we hear time and time again that applications are inherently unsecure, that mobile devices are just a trash pile basically of worms and viruses and compromised software. That even if your application isn't the one to get hacked, somebody else is somewhere there is going to get in there and take some vulnerability on somebody else's application is going to take yours down. So it sort of brings to mind, and maybe this is a question for you, Catherine. In your experience, what have you found the reverse engineers, the hacking community, are really going after on these mobile apps? Have you found that they are targeting specific vulnerabilities? What sort of techniques? Is it the same that they're using on enterprise software? Are they going after them in new ways? I'd love to hear any thoughts you have on what sort of the hacking community has brought to bear on mobile devices.
Yeah, sure. No, in fact, we recently wrote a white paper on this subject at Irdeto, and we decided to get one of our in-house white hackers to just sort of share his thoughts and his knowledge of what people do about mobile apps. And of course, the biggest challenge with mobile apps is that, once they're out there, they're out there forever. So anybody can have an older version of an app installed. So even if you patch an app after the fact, even if you cover up a security vulnerability later, the original vulnerability will still be out there and still be available on a number of devices. And these devices are fundamentally hostile environments, right? Once it's installed in my hands, I can root my device. I can install the app on an emulator. I can basically control the environment. I can control the inputs and outputs, and I can use lots of lovely tools like the ones you're familiar with, Andrew, right? I can use decompilers to do some static analysis. I can use instrumentation frameworks like Frida to figure out what's going on in the app, and fundamentally, I can modify the app to do the things that I want it to do. So security isn't necessarily about, not making mistakes. It's also about preventing someone going in after the fact and modifying the app to do something different than what you intended when you wrote it. And one of the interesting things about that is, often people will look at their mobile app and say, I'm not actually handling any secrets, or I'm not actually handling any payment information. So my app is probably safe from the eyes of a hacker. And one of the things our white hat told us and sort of kind of dispelled that myth, because sometimes what a hacker is going after is not necessarily the secrets in your app or your secret sauce, but rather just using your app as an attack vector to get on the device.
Right.
Perhaps your app, that its biggest weakness is that it's successful, that people like it, that it's installed widely. If you can get a hacker who decides to repackage your app with malware and use that as a way to convince some unsuspecting folks to install it, then they can use your app as a way to get their malware on devices. So it can be a lot more subtle than people think, and it maybe is not as simple as I encrypt my passwords. You really have to think more than what secrets you put in the app, but rather what can someone do in your app to modify it to get the ends that they want.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and this is a thought process that I feel like most application developers these days aren't necessarily going through, right? Which sort of gives credence to this idea of providing a security solution to application developers specifically and to the masses, right? To provide it in a way that's easy to use, raises that bar of entry to just say, look, if you're writing applications, you have to at least think about these problems. Think about the potential threat you're adding to everybody's mobile application. We're all in this together. We're all engineers at the end of the day, designing applications to be run and to provide some user experience. If you knew that one of your applications, a vulnerability in one of your applications was threatening that very user, I mean, that's something that keeps developers awake at night, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, it's a great idea to sort of give an entry level boost to security in mobile applications. I love it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I actually have some stats on that if you're interested, because I'm showing them anyway.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to. Love stats.
Yeah, so this is some data we got from an analyst report on a survey of public app stores and what sort of vulnerabilities are being found in mobile applications. And it's not 2 or 3% of mobile applications that have vulnerabilities. It's a lot. It's a lot of apps that haven't done everything they could to be secure. And then you might want to ask yourself why. And I'm going to try and go to the next slide. And this is telling, and I think this is the reality for a lot of app development companies or companies that develop mobile apps. In the end, people are often sacrificing security for time. And it might not be that they plan to be hacked or even accurately perceive the risk of being hacked. But in the end, features are what pays the bills. So you have a body of app developers who think they maybe should do some more security, but in the end, the businesses drive the deadlines, and they don't get as much time to think about it as they want. And on the flip side, you also find that some of the existing security solutions, some of the free ones, whatever, are a little bit trickier to use than you might think. And that, there have been studies that show, given people these tools to work with and giving them simple exercises to see whether or not they use them correctly, in a lot of cases they don't. And it's not because they're stupid people, but because you combine these two facts that it's not necessarily obvious what security needs to be applied where, and they're in a rush to meet deadlines. You end up with these large percentages of apps in the App Store that have vulnerabilities in them.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, again, it makes complete sense. And frankly, so do you guys consider this sort of the start of redefining what the best practices might be for application security? Like, at the very least, have a discussion with a security provider who might have a solution for you that's easy to use, cost effective, and can be used at scale. I mean, that seems to be, to me, the definition of a best practice as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well, of course, that's what I'm hoping for. It's just part of this webinar that, when we show off people what's possible, thanks to the brilliant work of people like Will, they'll see that there are easy and cost-effective ways to really raise their security bar on their mobile applications.
Okay, so with that in mind, I mean, I am a little curious. How real is this? Can we actually see it in action? Is this something you could actually demo over a webinar? I mean, can I mess around with it? Can you show it to me?
Did we lose Catherine?
Did we lose Catherine?
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I made the mistake of coming into the office and everything is wrong. Did you guys lose me for a moment there?
Okay. No, yeah, but you're back. You're good.
Yeah, I lost Wi-Fi for a second there. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, so I was just wondering, is there some sort of a demo, something that you could show, a little bit of proof in the pudding? I mean, right now I'm considering nominating you guys for a Nobel Peace Prize or something like that. I should at least have seen this tool in action so I can actually say, yeah, this actually does have some merit to it. There's some real teeth.
Yeah, sure. And now, of course, I'm having more technical issues, but I'm going to try and switch over to my Chrome browser. Hopefully you guys can see.
We got you there.
So what you're looking at here is trusted software. This is our portal through which you can automatically and easily protect mobile applications. And what you're seeing here, of course, is our web UI, but there are other ways to use it. And I'm just going to show how super easy it is to use. So all you do is you select a file. And in this case, I'm going to select an APK that someone else wrote. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to build anything. I didn't have to change any code. And I'm able to put it into the portal, and I'm going to be able to protect it in a second. And I think this is really important here, because you see I'm working on a fully compiled APK.
Right.
I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to upload any source code. I don't, the service does not need access to your Git repo. It's going to work on a fully built mobile application. And then it's as simple as this. You hit protect, and you're going to see it uploaded. You're going to see that it's submitted. And if I can scroll down, you're going to see that it's 5% complete already. So it's going to take a few minutes. You can see that my colleagues have been busy. I'm going to show you the results of previous ones. And you have some options in trusted software to decide, what kind of protections you want to enable. So in this case, this colleague of mine has enabled transcoding, which is code obfuscation. They've also enabled the automatic injection of root and jailbreak detection checks, because in their case, they want that to be flagged if the mobile application is running on a rooted device. And then, we have other features that are available in the service to detect for hooking frameworks or debuggers or things of that kind. So while that's checking away, I'm going to try and close this and show you perhaps something that will appeal to you more, Andrew, because I know you don't like dragging and dropping or using the mouse. Of course,
you know me too well.
Of course, we have the option to generate an API key that you can put in your GitLab runner, and so you don't have to manually do this, and you can just be part of your CI/CD. So that's it. I mean, that's as hard as it is. You take a fully built application, an Android one or an iOS XE archive file, you upload it to the service processes it, and a little bit later you'll be able to download it, sign it, and upload it to the store or do your testing or wherever you are in your development cycle.
Wow, I mean, have any of you guys ever had the experience of like watching your job disappear in front of you? Like just seeing the future just doesn't need you at all anymore? Because that's sort of what this is to me right here, to be honest with you. I mean, the process of us manually securing code in the past, even with our automated tools, literally takes weeks. I mean, it really would take quite a long time just for us to understand a code base. It takes quite a long time. So, I mean, if what you're saying, Will, if what you're saying your machine learning does is real, I mean, I'm out of a job, man. Say what you will. I'm out of a job.
Well, look, no, Andrew, see, this all makes it look way too simple, right? Because there's all that technology behind just the security aspect, those tools that provide those transformations, and the jailbreak and root detection. And these are big, complicated things that have taken a long time to develop, and you're just seeing click, button, done. So all that's hidden, and then of course the machine learning. It's just matching the right, paragraph, phrase of text, if you will, to the right set of tools. So, this isn't something that was built overnight. And in a way, I kind of feel bad for all the people who've worked on all the protection stuff, because you're never going to see it. You'll never get an appreciation for just how intense that stuff is, because now it's mostly click, done. But you can't replace somebody who has all that experience going through line by line by line. But I mean, when you start looking at some of these, especially in the enterprise space, where you've got 1 million, 2 million, 10 million lines of code, well, at a penny per line of code, it gets pretty expensive just to review that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I mean, to be honest, there's been a huge drought in security engineers for a long time. So a solution like this has been a long time coming, right? I mean, there's a reason guys like me are so expensive, and it's because schools don't churn them out, right? I mean, becoming a security expert takes a long time. It requires a lot of training. And really, if we want the base level of security to raise over time, we're really going to need to find a way to either produce more security conscious engineers or give them the tools they need to produce secured code themselves, right? And that's that really seems to be what you guys are doing, which is excellent. Okay, so
I mean, I can show you a little bit more about what's going on behind the scenes if you're interested, Andrew.
Sure, yeah, I'd love to hear. I love behind the scenes stuff. Come on, you know me.
Well,
This is what
Yeah.
I live for.
Yeah, you're going to like the next slide, but just briefly on
Okay.
this one, I guess I just want to sort of make it explicit what's going on in the background. And I know Will has explained this several times, but I like talking over my own slides. One of the things that's happening in the background is kind of a scheduling of security, and each piece of code that you upload, each function, is being assessed by the models that Will and his team have built for things like what is the size of the function, what is its expected execution cost, what is its security sensitivity, and he's using all these models to assign values to each function. And then part of what's happening in the background while trusted software is chugging away is it's trying to fit an optimal curve to all these parameters. It's trying to find the function that assigns the optimal level of security, both to achieve your security goals, but also not to overly increase the size of your app or to stretch out its execution time, or I'm sure there's a number of other models in there too that I'm not aware of. But the idea is, we're using all of these models and then using all of this data to try and find a best fit for your particular app and its particular function. But the next slide is even better because you get to look at Disassembler, Decompiler rather. On this slide, on this slide we have a before and after. I hope it's not too small for the audience to see. On the left, we've got what an app looks like before it's protected, and on the right, we've got the results after trusted software. And for those who are familiar with these kind of tools, the little diagram on the bottom left corner represents the control flow. So the sequence of code functions and their execution order or their causal relationship inside the application. And then you can see this box here with it's highlighted in red is what the application looks like after. So this is obviously going to mean something quickly to you, Andrew, but it shows that all the relationships between the code blocks and how the execution flows through the program is completely dissolved by trusted software. Yeah. And you're left with not being able to interpret how all of these pieces of code relate to each other, and that makes it really difficult for an attacker then to understand the program and launch an attack.
Yeah, it's a beautiful diagram. It's one of the ones that I have framed above my bed is a flattened control flow from a program. I think it's just an absolute thing of beauty. To keep the functional equivalence while removing any type of relation between two statements, I think is just mind-blowing.
And that effectively takes the attack from the static realm to the dynamic realm, right? If you want to understand how to manipulate the flow of the application, you now then have to instrument it or attach a debugger or basically open yourself up to some of our dynamic detections that I talked about, like the routing detection or the hooking framework detection. But perhaps we should also maybe mention something about these little tiny constants up here at the top.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, you can see that on the left, there's a lot of sort of relevant or significant numbers at the top, lots of zeros. And things you can imagine that might be meaningful to an attacker. You can imagine that it might be const values that an attacker might be interested in, or even just the ability to control a Boolean might be something that they would look for and use as an entry point into attacking an app. And you can see after we've protected it, all of those nice looking zeros have become random large high entropy numbers. Which will have no meaning to a viewer unless they run it and try and figure out how those values control the flow or how they interact with the program. So you can see that the complexity has gone way up. And this is what we do automatically, again, using the smart stuff that Will has devised to help us figure out, which blocks need more of this, which blocks need less of this. Perhaps your UI code does not need a lot of code protection, but the piece of your code that's doing your license enforcement or connecting to a backend system, or handling API keys, those things may need more. And that's what we're able to do automatically, applying all these great tools you see in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. I mean, like you say, the data transforms, the control flow, these are all techniques that I know and love. They're the ones that we apply all the time, but to see them applied this quickly this easily without any source code modifications whatsoever, I mean, that's the holy grail. That's what we've been dreaming of for decades. Fantastic. Great work, guys. I'm really impressed.
It gets even better.
Oh,
Because
don't tell me it gets even better, Catherine.
I
No
think
way.
it gets even better, like stick knives and the whole thing. No, I think part of what we're trying to do is make it easy for people to use trusted software, but also to try it. So, anyone who is interested in trying it out for free, they can certainly go to our Get Your Free Trial link below and sign up, and they will get a free account, and they'll be able to play around with it and see what it does for themselves.
Wow. Well, I know I'm certainly planning on signing up right now. Because I'm an employee, do I actually get paid to use it as well? I mean, is it beyond a free trial? I actually get money back for making use of it? Because yeah, I'm about to sign up and start protecting my my cloned version of Flappy Bird. Actually, is my plan. I'll release Security Bird is the plan. Okay, so I think if that's, I mean, I got a ton of great information out of this. Hopefully the audience did as well. I think we've left some time at the end for some questions from opening up to the floor or something like that. Is that the plan now? Yeah.
We have got
great.
gotten so many great questions in, but before we get the question and answer period, we do have a couple polling questions I want to send on out to the audience. Here comes the first one coming your way. Which of these possible attacks on your mobile app are you most concerned about? So you can select from one of the following: stealing customer data, cracking license restrictions, stealing secrets or intellectual property, repacking the app with malware, or none of these. So go ahead and make your selection. And while we are doing that, do want to remind the audience, as I said before, we've gotten a lot of great questions in, but we have lots of time for question and answer period. So go ahead and get your questions in. If you have one or two or three or more, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this one, and we'll go ahead and take a look at the results. I'm closing it now in 3, 2, 1. Okay, it's closed. Here are the results. The possible attacks on your mobile app are you most concerned about? Looks like the majority of folks are most concerned with stealing customer data. Interesting stuff. Okay, let's take a look at.
A lot of sense.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Nobody wants to have their customer data stolen, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at
running
the
a lot of healthcare specific apps these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, here's the next poll question. How would your company tell if one of its mobile apps had been hacked? You can select from one of the following. I am not sure. I have little visibility on that. We all have the security in place that can detect that, or my company does not have a mobile app. Go ahead and make your decision, make your selection, and we'll give this about 30 seconds or so to get the answers from everybody. And another quick reminder while we're waiting, the event is being recorded, so if you missed any or all of it, or if you just want to watch it again, you will have the opportunity to do so. We are recording it, and then after today's webinar, we are going to be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. Okay, let's go ahead and close this poll out in 3, 2, 1. All right, and here are the results. I'm not sure. I have little visibility on that. It doesn't exactly fill my heart with complaints. I just don't feel comfortable with that answer. I'm sorry. Everybody has to go back and try it again. All right, guys. We have one more question, one more polling questions, then we'll get to the question and answer period. And here it comes. Launch the poll. Knowing that there is no integration required, are you interested in trying trusted software for free? Simply yes or no, or maybe later in time. So go ahead and make your choice. And then we'll get to some of these amazing questions that have come in from so many members of our audience. But like I said before, plenty of time for question and answer period. So if you do have a question, go ahead and get it on in. And even if we get too many questions, please know that the folks at Irdeto are getting a copy of all of the questions that come in. So if they can't answer your question during the webinar, they'll be more than happy to follow up offline and get your question answered. Okay, going to go ahead and close out this last polling question in 3, 2, 1. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the question and answer period. And we will start with, so many good ones. Okay, okay, here's one. We hear a lot about TikTok, Scalar, etc. Apps that are not secured. So how can one make sure these types of apps can be used with personal data securely?
Yeah,
who wants to
that's
take that one?
Or shall I?
You can go ahead, Catherine. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that the sad answer is it's really incumbent on the app developer to do a responsible job of protecting the data. It's not a lot we can do after the fact if apps are released in ways that can be tampered with, or if they have inherent security vulnerabilities. It really is up to the app developer to do it correctly.
Definitely, but I would say push back on the app developers, right? So you guys who are seriously concerned about who have privacy concerns, ask the developers what techniques they're putting in place to protect your privacy, right? So you want to hear them say things like, we are using code obfuscation, we are using jailbreak, and we're using anti-debuggers. That's the type of answer you want to hear from these guys, or at the very least that they've spoken with third parties that have certified them as a protected app. I mean, it really comes from the consumers. If people start voting with their wallet, that's what's going to make a difference to these guys that are releasing apps that are in absolute shambles. I mean, it's criminal what people are able to get away with, and simply due to, for the large part, consumers who don't feel they have any power in the decision.
All right, great. Next question here. It's actually more of a comment, but I assume you are different from container scanning.
Yes, quite different. Yeah. I'm not really sure how to elaborate on that, but I think probably with container scanning, you're looking at using tools to scan for security vulnerabilities that are previously known. And one of the interesting things about a code obfuscation technique, or about the sorts of things we do, is it's not like an anti-malware solution that looks for signatures for known attacks. It prevents your code from being susceptible to known and unknown attacks. It is making your code inherently strong against the kinds of things that we know about and the kinds of things to come. It is much more of a prevention than a response.
All right.
You want to add to
Next
that?
question here.
Nodding.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, that's bang on, Catherine. And I mean, the other great thing about solutions like these is that the security is actually baked into the source code itself. So this isn't some additional secure loader or something that needs to be added to the mobile device or anything like that. The software itself is inherently more secure. So it prevents people from developing an exploit against your product, right? And that is a huge difference from, okay, let's try and build a framework around our application that is going to hopefully detect problems as they arise. It's far better to actually bake the security directly into the software itself.
Okay.
I see a question for Will. Can I read out one of the questions from?
Knock yourself out. Go right ahead.
I see one here that is asking, what techniques of AI are you using, Will?
Well, so in this, I mean, there's a number of different models, but fundamentally they're all natural language processing. So we start with feature encoding like we would. We spent quite a bit of time researching and testing different ways to represent code as a number. And in our case, a meaningful number that would help models later estimate things like security value, or what's the performance impact going to be, or how does this code relate to feature X or Y. I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, but generally that's it. We use a number of different model types. There's not just one, but I mean, suffice to say, it's a large natural language processing problem, and you know, that kind of makes sense if you think about code. It isn't as complicated as a human language. There's subsets. There's just, it's mostly verbs, not nouns, right? So you're really describing actions on things. So in some sense, it's a little bit more complicated to understand the context of something, because you know, somebody could call a variable banana when they're talking about a skyscraper, and the code's going to work just fine. It doesn't matter. So we can't really rely on things like that. But you know, in terms of what's happening, that's really where the models focus in on. And you know, there's a lot of patterns in code. You might think, I know a lot of people have, that there's an infinite number of ways to write something. No, there's not. There's just not. That's not what it is, and we know because we've counted.
One of the interesting things I learned from working with you on this, Will, is just how these models evolve. Because I remember in the early days when you just had some very simple statistical models that you generated, you know, we could actually understand what the models were doing. You know, you were able to come back and say, oh, it's cool. You know, it seems that functions with have more parameters tend to have more security sensitivity than ones with fewer. And, you know, at a certain point during this development, we all sort of nodded our heads and said, okay, that makes sense. But since then, they've grown so much that I don't think we can even accurately, you know, frame what they're doing. They're understanding and responding to things that maybe aren't intuitive to us.
Well, and that's true. And I mean, just the notion of security, there's no one strict definition for it. You know, like depending on who you ask, and we have customers who might be really, really interested in securing media, and we have other customers who might really be interested in like their license management or the launch codes to the nuclear missile, so to speak, right? And if you ask each of these people what's the priority here, they're all going to scream out this is. You know, that's part of the challenge here. And to your point, Catherine, the longer we've been at this and the more research and the more effort we've been put at it, the harder it is for us as people to understand it. And I think part of that just has to do with the fact that there's really not a language for it. Like right now, it's hard enough just to talk about amongst people. Having these models that have, in some capacity, been able to capture the thought process of people like Andrew and other people and into one unified view. There may not be like a direct human translation anymore.
Okay. I have a feeling you guys could have this conversation all day about the AI. That's great. But we do have lots of other questions, so let's go ahead and move on. Well, here's one. Does trusted software support all types of data? Or sorry, does trusted software support all types of security, such as system security, data protection, app security, services security, and hardware security?
I think probably the answer is no, if I understand the question correctly. So obviously we don't impact the hardware, and we don't do anything at the hardware level. But some of those other things that you mentioned, for sure. So it's really about the mobile application, and within the mobile application itself, how you make it resilient. So obviously we don't get a chance to modify what Google has done on Android or what Apple has done on iOS, but within that framework, we're ensuring your mobile app operates as intended and doesn't become susceptible to hackers. So that means, yes, we do protect data. And I think a couple of the other things you mentioned, but it's about the app security. Anything to add, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's bang on. The one piece you might consider lumping in would be cryptography. A lot of people rely very heavily on hardware to secure their crypto keys at this point. One possible way of getting away from having to lock into specific hardware security modules, or HSMs, would be a move towards a software-based cryptographic solution. So moving towards something like a white box solution will allow you to embed your keys securely within your software, and then you can maybe move away a little bit from whatever hardware security you've been relying on in the past.
Excellent. Okay. All right, let's see. Next question. Are you using any encryption?
Okay. I mean, feel free to take this one, Catherine.
I feel like I'm taking all of them, but sure. So I think I'm gonna read a little into that question because we get it sometimes. People sometimes wonder whether code obfuscation or code protection is the same as code encryption, like the way you might encrypt a firmware update or an OTA update so that it can't be, reversed statically. So it's not quite the same. We're not encrypting the software because one of the powerful things we're able to do is we're able to run it. So if you encrypt software, you can't execute it. You have to decrypt it before you can run it. But if you transform software using these transformations that Andrew and others worked on before, you have code that is functionally the same, but with all of the semantic content destroyed. So you can still run it. You can still do everything you want with it without exposing its structure. Andrew?
Yeah, exactly. And that is a fundamental difference and a massive increase in security, right? Because as soon as you realize something has to be decrypted in order to execute, well, the attacker is going to wait until it's decrypted and pause execution at that point, right? And then it's as though you had no security at all. So the whole idea behind code obfuscation is to make the code difficult to understand by a human, but still have the computer be able to execute the code, right? So that's the fundamental difference there. And it's why obfuscation is, generally considered a more secure solution than encryption for programs, because we don't have to remove all of the security in order for the code to execute. Now, if the question was also, do we have support for encryption? I did sort of mention white box cryptography a little bit earlier. I don't think the white box cryptography libraries are a part of trusted software yet, but they are coming. And this is something that Irdeto has hung its hat on for quite a long time. We are the inventor of white box cryptography. We do hold the original patent for white box cryptography. And that is the idea of building a encryption and decryption algorithm that even if an attacker can watch it execute, even if you can watch the encryption and decryption take place, your cryptographic key is impossible to be leaked, right? So it's still kept securely even while the encryption and decryption are taking place. And that is done entirely within software. So it really removes the requirement for some sort of expensive HSM or a reliance on a hardware device, a specific hardware device, and allows your software to be much more portable because it's just software at that point. So your secure cryptographic solution can be run on any device, but you don't have to worry about a hacker having access to the cryptographic keys.
All right, great. So we are about 8 minutes to the top of the hour. We have about 5 more minutes for question and answer. So let's see, how long is the trial?
That's an easy one. 30 days. We want to give people enough time to use the service in a bunch of different ways, and to frankly, if they want to do some pen testing on the results and satisfy themselves on the security, we want to give them plenty of time.
All right, excellent. Next one, is this limited to iOS and Android? And is there any value? I just lost it here, hold on. Yard. Okay, is there any value outside of mobile? I'm assuming that if, coding once deploying multiple could at least get some benefits.
I love this question because it speaks to my heart as a product manager. So today, if we have to ground ourselves in the present, it's iOS and Android only. But certainly my ambition is bigger and broader and encompasses more platforms, because I really believe this is the right model. That if we can make it easy for people to protect anything, their Lambda functions, their whatever they're doing with this kind of model, then we've really solved a security problem for everybody. So stick with us and we will get there, but for the moment it's only iOS and Android.
All right then. Next question, do you have any customers that are using these tools for reversing malware?
I am going to say no. I don't know that they would admit it to us if they were. I'm also not sure exactly how that would work. I think it's
Yeah,
actually more likely someone would
interesting.
use it to detect malware. Probably shouldn't throw that idea out there, but
Yeah, let's not
Yeah,
talk about
exactly.
that. There is no
Yeah.
place for that.
You could say it, but then they'd have to kill you. So I don't think you want to go there anyway.
Yeah.
So, okay, next question. I've had IT teams tell me we are safer since our apps operate within the sandbox created by our MDM. Have you seen compromised apps operating outside our sandbox access data or apps within the sandbox?
You mean like a hypervisor attack type of?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the quality of your MDM, to be honest with you. So how much trust do you have in your IT team? Yeah, I mean, there can always be vulnerabilities present even in a well-designed MDM, right? So this is kind of the idea of you can set up perimeter defenses, right? Whether it's network security, whether it's virtualization software. If you're building a sandbox, you are inherently erecting walls, right, around what you consider to be a secure element. Now, the problem with walls is that there's always a taller ladder that comes along, right? So eventually, somebody's going to find a way into the walled garden. And really, at that point, what you want is something there. You want some sort of dog behind the fence that is there to protect in worst case scenario. And when you have something that is so low impact, that is so easy to deploy, the real question is, why wouldn't you want to secure your crown jewels as best you can, right? So yes, put up a fence, put up those walls, but still make sure that you've got that guard dog in place as well, right? And that's what it comes down to, is you want to make sure that you're protecting the software itself.
And I think I can add some color to that as well, Andrew.
Sure.
Without revealing customer names, maybe reference a scenario where we had, people who were installing their mobile app on, MDM controlled devices that were meant to remain within the enterprise. And of course, the IT department was doing everything they could to keep the devices secure by installing the device management software. What they couldn't protect against was someone lifting that app, putting it on a non-protected device and doing stuff to it. So in that case,
Yeah.
the app, in that case, it was an enterprise app. It's something they were trying to protect, and the MDM doesn't prevent that at all. So it depends on your threat model, and it depends on what you're trying to do. But in some cases, an MDM just doesn't solve the problem, the core problem.
All right, great. Well, we are about 3 minutes to the top of the hour. So unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for question and answer period. But I do want to remind the audience that if we didn't get to your question, we did not get to your question during the webinar, the folks at Irdeto are getting a copy of all of the questions that came through, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to follow up with you offline and get your question answered. Also, final reminder to the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the event, or if you just want to watch it again, you'll have the opportunity to do so. Following today's webinar, we are sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the devops.com website. So you can always go look for it there. Just go to devops.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. Okay, before you guys sign off today, I did mention at the top of the hour that we would be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to that. Our first big winner today is Kayla M. Congratulations, Kayla. Second winner today, Stephen W. Congratulations, Stephen. Our third winner today, James V. Congratulations, James. And our fourth and final winner today is Walter M. Congratulations, Walter. We'll be following up with all 4 of you offline by email to get your $25 Amazon gift cards over to you. So please check your inbox. If you don't see it in your inbox, please check your spam folder. Okay, Catherine, Will, and Andrew, what a great presentation. Thank you so much for your time, your expertise. Judging from the amount of questions we got from the audience, very well received, lots of great information, and just very engaging. Thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you. It was a ton of fun. Loved it.
All right. All right, great. I also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.
Take care.